All right, so we will be recording this webinar and it will get posted to the Hawaii Avocet site under training, and then the name of this webinar, the Hawaii Infrastructure Trial and Tech Readiness. There will also be a second webinar this week on Thursday at the same time as today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Laura Jennings. As I mentioned, I've been with ACT Aspire for a few years now doing these presentations. I'm located here in the lovely state of Texas in Austin, but I've been to Hawaii many times. It's one of my very favorite places to go, so I'm very pleased to be able to be doing this presentation with you all. I can only just imagine the palm trees and blue skies, so it makes me think of one of my favorite places. So hopefully this webinar today won't be too mundane, and there'll be a little bit of exciting information for you. Please feel free to ask any questions during today's webinar. There is a Q&A function with the Zoom webinar meeting. You go ahead and hit that Q&A button and you will be able to type in a question and go ahead and hit send. And I will be able to monitor that while we are doing this presentation. I'll be able to answer any questions through the time of the meeting. If not, I will go ahead and get that information and try and get that answer to you by the end of the webinar. All right, so let's talk about technology readiness. There's a few updates and reminders. So the first thing is our landing page. actaspire.pearson.com has a technology setup page. So all of the information that I'm going to give you today about technically being ready for online testing is going to be on this page. So you want to make sure that you bookmark the actaspire.pearson.com site and that you go ahead and get familiar with the technology setup page. So I'm going to quickly go here to the site. You're going to hit technology setup, and you're going to be able to come right down here to all of this information. There's the technical guide, there's bulletins, there's TestNav 8 information, Proctor Cache system check. We're going to talk about all of this today. There are the installable apps for TestNav, whether you're using desktops, iPads, or Chromebooks. And then there's some other resources down here at the bottom. So it's a lot of information, and I'm sure you're probably wondering, where do I start? So I'm just going to tell you right up front. I'm going to talk to you here for about an hour and a half. We're going to go over a lot of stuff, and you're not going to retain any of that information or remember any of it. That's okay. You want to start here with your technology coordinator checklist and the technical readiness manual. That's where you want to start. And then a little bit later, I'm going to show you where that infrastructure trials guide is located for your infrastructure trial. But all your technical readiness for your infrastructure trial is the same technical readiness for online testing for your live testing. So you want to start here with that coordinator checklist, that readiness manual, and it's going to point you to all the things that you need to do and all of the links that are here so that you can do them. All right, let's go back real quick to our presentation. There we go. All right, additionally, another update is our TestNav and Proctor Cache requirements, as well as information about setting up Chromebooks and other devices, troubleshooting technical bulletins. They can all be found on our support page for TestNav 8. So there's a link right here. You can also get to it from that landing page. I'll go ahead and select the link real quick. We'll just go straight to that site. It's all TestNav 8. You have your system requirements, Proctor Cache information, if you're going to be setting up for your desktops, your laptops, Mac, Windows, if you're going to be using Chromebooks, for those of you that might be using an iPad, there's troubleshooting information. It's all located right here on this site. You can get here from the landing page as well. You just want to come right here to that technology setup page and hit TestNav system requirements, and it's going to take you right to where I just was. All right, so let's talk about proctor caching and what that is. For those of you who did any of the online testing last year, you may be familiar with this already, but proctor caching is a way for you to maximize the performance of your internet intranet to your testing devices. It's going to allow you basically to take the test content, store it locally so that it can be delivered much more efficiently to those student testing devices. This is going to give you better performance and allow you to potentially test a lot more students at one time than you would normally be able to do across the internet to our servers. So if we were delivering the test content from our servers all the way to your student computers, you'd have a lot of network traffic going on across your internet, and it could have some performance issues. You don't want to experience those timeouts or any of those kind of network traffic issues. So if you can store the test content locally, it's encrypted, then you have a shorter delivery route. So it goes directly from your own intranet to, or your local area network to your student testing computers. It's going to make things a lot more efficient for you. So proctor caching produces a lot of benefits, and therefore it is required for online testing. So you're going to want to do this for your infrastructure trial as well. So everything I talked to you about proctor caching, you're going to want to set up in preparation for your infrastructure trial. And once that's done, you don't have to do it again. It's all set up and ready to go then for your live testing. So if you have proctor caching installed from last year, you want to go ahead and uninstall that version. Every school year, we start our components to online testing with a new version. So we have a new version of proctor caching to support our new version of TestNav 8. And we have a new version of System Check to support both proctor caching and TestNav 8 this year. So for proctor cache, if you have it installed from last year, you want to go ahead and uninstall it. It's very simple and easy to do. And you want to go ahead and get the new download installer for the new proctor cache this year. You can get to that link from the landing page, right from that technology setup page in that proctor cache area in the center. It can get you to that link, or you can go straight to download.testnav.com and your proctor cache download links will be located there as well. You want to go ahead and run that installer. It automatically starts proctor cache service. And you want to go ahead and open the diagnostic screen and just make sure that everything is installed properly. You can install proctor cache at a local computer at a school, say one of the extra computers in the library or computer lab, or you can install it at a district level at a district server. If you choose, that's entirely up to you. Once you open proctor cache diagnostics, make sure that it's running correctly. You'll see in the top the menu items are test, clients, and settings. So when you first start it and install it, all of this is going to be blank. If you hit the test tab, there's not going to be anything loaded because you have not pre-cached any test content yet. When you go to the clients tab, that's the student computers that are hitting proctor caching. That should also be blank. None of the student computers are connected to it yet. But when they are, this is how you'll be able to monitor that all of that is going well during your infrastructure trial or during live testing. You'll be able to come here to this diagnostic and see all that activity happening. And then in the settings tab, you can set up a custom password. So if you need to modify any of that test content, if you want to refresh it, reload it, basically purge it or delete it, you can set up a separate password so that you can make sure that no one else can get in there to do that except for the right personnel at your location. Once you've set up proctor caching, you want to make sure that the student computers can link to that proctor caching. And I know that you don't want to have to touch every single computer to do that. So you don't have to. Yay! You get to go straight into the ACT Aspire portal where all of your student data is kept. And you want to go in here and put the IP address of that computer that you've installed proctor cache on. So if it's on a computer in your library or in your computer lab or even at your district level, you want to put in that IP address and the port 4480. So when you go into the portal, your technology coordinator will log into the portal. They will go to the organizations menu, hit proctor cache settings as an option, and you'll get this screen that you see here. You'll put that IP address in and the port 4480. Now I want to stop for a second and let you know there's an exception to every rule. This is where one of them is. For live testing, this is exactly the process you follow. For your infrastructure trials, when we go over that a little bit later in today's training, this is not what you will do. You will actually put this information in at the test session level. So instead of coming to organizations to put in this IP address and the port 4480, you will actually have this option when you create a test session, and you'll actually do it at the test session level. And the reason is the infrastructure trial tenant, where you're going to run that dress rehearsal or that test, is a shared workspace with other users. And if you put the IP address in for your computer, then all the shared users will be linking to your Proctor cache, right, in the infrastructure trial, and you don't want that. You want only you and your test sessions for your infrastructure trial to link to your Proctor cache. But for live testing, for actual testing, you will come here to organizations and put in that Proctor cache information. So hopefully that's not too confusing. Once again, if you have any questions about this, please use that Q&A box on your screen and go ahead and type in a question. But you always do have to put in that IP address and that port into the portal so that TestNav will know that that student who's logging in is supposed to get their test content from your location. There's just two ways to do it. You do it at the test session, or you do it globally for all test sessions. So in your Hawaii portal, in your district and schools location, you would do it here under organizations, and in the infrastructure trial, we'll talk a little bit later, you'll actually just do that at the test session level. You'll see here that there's a check status button. So once you put that IP address and that port into the portal, you can actually check the status and make sure it's linking to that Proctor cache computer that it can see it. But that only works if the computer you're using to access the portal is on the same network as that Proctor cache computer. If it's not on the same network, then that check status won't work. You'll still want to put that IP address in there, and you'll still want to put that port number in there and hit save. When you go back to the organizations menu in the portal, if you go to manage test sessions, you will see that your test sessions have some metadata attached to them. And one of them is that Proctor cache number. So if you do this before testing and before setting up the test sessions, then all test sessions created after this setting is put in will be automatically linked to that Proctor cache IP address. But if you have test sessions already created and this Proctor cache information is being put in after that, that's fine. Just when you come here to organizations, manage test sessions, you're going to want to click that little action button, and it will go ahead and then link that test session to that IP address that you just put in. So my advice to you, best practice, is go ahead and set up Proctor caching and put your Proctor cache setting in before live testing and before test sessions are created. But if you've created test sessions, if your test coordinator has already created the test sessions and your technology coordinator after the fact goes in and sets up Proctor caching, that's okay. Just come here to organizations, manage test sessions, and you can link your test sessions to that Proctor cache machine. Now that Proctor caching is set up, you've installed it, you've made sure it's working, you've gone into the portal and told the portal, hey, I'm doing Proctor caching, here's my IP address. Your test sessions are linked to that IP address. Now you want to go ahead and make sure that you download the test content. So you want to go back to that Organizations tab. Everything's under the Organizations tab for Proctor caching. And you want to select the pre-cache test option. That's going to give you the tests that you can download. You will select the ones that you want, and you'll go ahead and hit that pre-cache button in the upper right-hand corner. And what that will do is download that test content encrypted to that Proctor cache location that is that IP address, and it will use port 4480 for that communication. You can then open that diagnostic screen we saw a little earlier, and under the test tab of the Proctor cache diagnostic, you'll actually see the test content that's been loaded, and so you'll actually see that it's there. And then eventually, when you do get students to be logging into tests, or when you do your infrastructure trial and you use a student testing device to kind of finalize that infrastructure trial and connect to Proctor cache, you'll actually be able to see that device under the Clients tab, connect to Proctor cache, and utilize that test content. So let's talk about system check for TestNav. So the first clarity, as you can see here, is that this is for desktop, or in the rare exception that you're using browser-based testing. System check is not for your tablet device testing. So if you're using Chromebooks or iPad, you want to go ahead and use the TestNav app check, which we're going to show you a little bit later. But if you are using desktops and laptops for testing, then system check can be used to confirm that those devices are working properly and that they have all of the requirements needed to run TestNav. And you can also do what we call a bandwidth check. Make sure your download speeds are appropriate and it will give you an estimate of approximately the number of students that you can test at any one time. Now, this is a in-the-moment test. So this test, when you run it, will only tell you, here's what's happening right now this second. So you want to make sure that you're running system check and kind of doing a gauge of, am I really ready from the estimate and the bandwidth speed test. You want to make sure that you're doing that on the day of the week and the time of the day that you plan to do your actual testing. So let's say you're going to do your live testing on a Monday at 9 a.m. Well, then a couple of weeks beforehand, you want to be on a Monday at 9 a.m. and you want to go ahead and run system check and do your bandwidth test at the same time, so you can see if there's anything else in the background. Somebody could be doing attendance. Other things could be running in the background that could be sapping some of your network speed, and you want to make sure that you've accounted for all of that. So system check does run in a browser, and it does require Java. Now, the browser that we're going to request that you use is called Firefox ESR 45, and you want the 32-bit version for that. This is not your standard Firefox, so you will want to make sure that you actually use Firefox ESR 45 and the 32-bit version. If you need to access this, you can Google it, but we can also get you that link when you go. I'm just going to escape real quick. When you come here to our TestNav 8 requirements and system updates information page, you will find that that information is located here as well, and you can get it right from this location. So if you're right here on TestNav system requirements, if you come down here to the bottom, you'll see that there's a link to the Firefox ESR 45 right there. So you can get it straight from there as well. Once you have system check installed, when you're doing the system check for the student testing computers, you need to be on the student testing computer. So the laptop or the desktop in your library, on your mobile cart, or in your computer lab, whatever devices that your students are actually going to test on, you want to go ahead and take one, and you want to go ahead and launch system check, and you can do a check your system. You'd go ahead and just hit that start button, and it will go ahead and check the system and determine if there's anything that you need to update in order to run TestNav. So you'll see in this particular case, everything is good to go. The operating system is proper. If you are doing browser-based, your browser and Java are the right versions. Additionally, below this section on system check is a verification option, which has a link to TestNav, and you can select that link, and it will allow you to just verify that TestNav will launch in secure mode on that device. It's a one-question test that basically, after you've clicked it and signed in and launched it, it then tells you, congratulations, you are good to go. You can also print this information out. So if all of the computers in your library are the same image, you don't necessarily have to run system check on every computer in the library. What you can do is run it on one or two of them. If they're all the same image, it should be fine. And then you can print out this information and kind of save it somewhere so you know that I've already checked these and it all, you know, came up with green checks and we're good to go. Now, the testing capacity, this is where most technology coordinators actually get the best benefit. What we want to do here is basically just test your download speed. So if your student computer, so you're still on that student computer running the system check, and you want to test that that test content is going to download as the speed that's going to be appropriate for that student to be able to test, that there's not going to be any timeouts, and that you're going to be able to test the number of students that you want to test. So if you're trying to test 500 students, this testing capacity will tell you if you can do that or not. You can also add the proctor caching. So it's going to be defaulted to just come directly to our servers. But if you're using proctor caching, which you should be, you can just come here and add that caching computer by hitting this button up at the top, and it will add it to the list. So you'll see here I've got a high school caching machine located. And then you want to go ahead and hit start. And what it's going to do is it's going to run across your network and all the way across your internet to our network, to our servers. And it's going to come back and tell you what your download speeds are and how many students you can test. So in this particular test, my download speeds from the location of the test all the way to our servers was 39 megabits per second versus the test from that testing computer to my local Proctor cache was 214 megabits per second. So I had a much better download speed from the Proctor cache. And as a result, I could test a lot more students. So if I'm trying to test 500 students, I can tell right away. That's going to potentially be a problem if I don't have Proctor caching, because it's only going to let me test 398 students before I can start expecting to see some delays and some timeouts and some technical difficulties. And so I want to avoid that. So that's why Proctor caching is so important and such a benefit. And then system check helps make sure that everything is set up properly and the Proctor caching is giving you the benefits that you need. In a unique case, you might find the opposite. You might find that your speed is faster direct to our servers than from your Proctor cache machine. And what that means is that there's something on your intranet or your local area network that's slowing things down. And that's something you want to find out ahead of time, and you want your technology people to clear up and be able to fix before you start testing. All right, so now let's talk about TestNav 8. We've talked about Proctor caching, which is going to let you store that test content locally, so you have a much faster delivery of test content and smoother, efficient test content delivery to your students. You've got system checks that's going to make sure that your laptops and desktops are meeting those requirements. You can do a quick verification, make sure TestNav is going to launch okay, and you can also do that capacity test to make sure you're going to have the right network speeds to test the number of students you want to test. Now we're talking TestNav 8. TestNav 8 is used by the students. You don't actually engage with TestNav 8. The students do. This is how they're going to take their test. So we do recommend that you use the TestNav app, the installable app. Last year we had the app and browser-based. This year we still do have browser-based, but we are starting to phase out that process. We want to go towards the app. There's a lot more benefits, a lot more features, and a lot more stability with that. Browser-based does require that you configure Java and that you have the right configurations for your browser. So this year, if you are going to use browser-based, you will have some limitations on your browser. You need to use that Firefox ESR. But for your apps, they have availability in desktop, laptop, Mac, Windows, Linux, Chromebooks, iPads. So everything has an app. It's really, they're small footprint installs. You can push them out, so you don't have to touch every device. So your best practice and our advice is to definitely use the TestNav app. If you do need to use browser-based, hopefully that's an exception to the rule. You must use Firefox ESR 45, and as I mentioned, that is not your standard Firefox. It's not the Firefox that you have installed on your computers right now. It is a different version. You will need to go get it. We do have a link to it on our TestNav requirements page, so you can go right to it and download it. But as I said, that should be an exception to the rule. You'll want to use those TestNav 8 apps instead. And then all of the requirements are here. And as I mentioned, you just kind of hit these links. This information is posted for you. It's being recorded and will be posted for you. So all these links will be available. Or if you just go ahead and bookmark this TestNav 8 supportassessment.pearson.com page, you come here to TestNav system requirements, and all of it is listed here. One thing I do want to make note of is you'll see that there is information about Android devices. ACT Aspire does not support Android device testing, so you want to go ahead and disregard any of the information on Android devices. But your iPad, your Chromebook, your Windows, your Mac, your Linux, desktop laptops, all of that other requirement information is located here on this page. And as I mentioned down here at the bottom, here is that link directly to that Firefox ESR 45 32-bit. It comes in 64-bit as well. You want to make sure you're using the 32-bit version. So please make sure that you understand that. All righty, let's get back to our little presentation. All right, so there's two setup methods, as I mentioned. The installable, if you go to download.testnav.com, or from our landing page, that technology page had links directly to all of the downloadable apps for whichever way you're testing: desktop, laptop, Mac, Windows, iPads, Chromebooks. All of the links are there for those installs, and as I said, you can push them out. You don't need to touch every device. If there is an exception to the rule and you do need to use browser-based TestNav, that's fine, it does work, but you must use Firefox ESR 45, the 32-bit version, and we do have a link available for that as well. Now let's talk network configuration. It would be nice if I said that was it. You just install this little small footprint app and you're good to go. But that's never the case, right? No. There's a whole bunch of communication that's going to go back and forth between Proctor Cache and our servers, between System Check and our servers, between TestNav, our servers, your servers. There's data going back and forth. So we do have a significant amount of URLs here that we need you to whitelist. Anything beyond any of your blocking systems, spam filters, content filters, anything that may block or manage information in and out of your school or your district needs to have these URLs whitelisted so that you don't have any blocking data issues when testing. You just don't want to get those errors that says testing can't continue or there's a problem with testing due to a communication issue. So this is on our requirements page. So as I said, for your technology coordinators, go ahead and go to that checklist and go to the technical manual. And all of this information is going to be in there. And on our requirements support page, all of these URLs are going to be listed. But you do want to make sure that you whitelist these. All of this needs to be done for your infrastructure trial. So everything I've talked to you about, you're going to need to do this in preparation for your infrastructure trial. And once you've done it for your infrastructure trial, it's done now for your live testing. Obviously, there's a lag time between your infrastructure trial and when you do live testing. So you'll want to go ahead and kind of do a recheck before live testing, make sure nothing has changed. But the beauty part is once you've kind of set all of this up and you've done this and you've had successful infrastructure trial testing, then a lot of this work is completed and you're good to go. We do have an update. There is a new version of OS for your Mac laptops and desktops, your OS 10.12 Sierra, as well as for your iPads, the iOS 10 operating system. Those have just recently come out. Please do not accept those upgrades of those operating systems at this time. We are working with Apple. There are some technology security issues that need to be worked out. Apple is working diligently on fixing those. We're working very closely with them. I cannot give you an ETA on when that will be fixed, but at this point in time, please do not upgrade to the Mac OS 10.12 Sierra or the iOS 10 operating systems. This information did go out earlier this month in October, but just as a reminder to everybody, we want to make sure that you don't upgrade. If you have already upgraded and these are devices you want to use for testing, then you will need to contact Apple support in order to work with that and get back to the previous operating system. All right, when TestNav is launched on a device for the first time, and that will be this year, so even though you used TestNav last year, because you're going to be using a brand new TestNav this year, you're going to uninstall Proctor Cache and install a new Proctor Cache, and you're going to uninstall or remove TestNav app, and you're going to put in the new TestNav app. It will be launching for the first time on these devices. You will come to the master screen for all the different programs that are using TestNav. You want to make sure that ACT Aspire is the first selected option. After you've selected that the first time, every time you log into TestNav from that device, it will automatically be in the ACT Aspire program. And if the wrong one is selected, let's say somebody quickly just chose the ACT at the top because it looks similar, that's okay. Once you're on that login page, there's a little person icon in the upper right-hand corner of the TestNav 8 screen, and you can just go back and choose a different customer, and it will bring you back to this page, and you can select the ACT Aspire, so you can quickly get back to that. All right, so let's talk about Chromebooks. If you are going to be testing on Chromebooks, there are two setup methods for that. So you can install the app from a managed Chromebook, or you can do an unmanaged Chromebook setup. My assumption is that most schools that have a ton of Chromebooks out with their students have the managed Chromebook option. And that basically means you can set up your TestNav 8 app, you can install it, put it in kiosk mode, and kind of push that out to all those Chromebooks. Otherwise, you do have to touch every single Chromebook to make sure that it's set up correctly if you do not have a managed system. Most schools, I suspect, though, if you have a significant amount of Chromebook devices out there, have a managed process. But if you do have an unmanaged Chromebook you will have to touch every Chromebook in that case. You'll have to install that TestNav 8 app and make sure that it will run in kiosk mode. And there are instructions to do all of this on our site. on the requirements page, let me go ahead and show you where all of that information is kept. So right here on this requirements page, there's a kiosk mode setup menu item, table of contents, and you can see right here, setting up TestNav on Chromebooks is outlined, on iPads, as I mentioned, on your desktops and laptops. And of course, please ignore any Android device information that's not supported. But your Chromebook information is all located here, and it gives you links to be able to do everything that you need to do, as well as it gives you screenshots. You can just click these little click here screenshots, and it will walk you through the process. All right, oops, where did we go? I got a little bit further along than I needed to. All right, and as I mentioned before, system check does not work on your Chromebook or iPad devices. It works on your laptops and desktops, but your Chromebook and laptop devices will have what's called app check. So when you've installed TestNav and put it in the right kiosk mode, when you go to that sign-in screen, when you launch it and you're at that sign-in screen, in the upper right-hand corner where that little person icon is, you will see that there is an app check option, and that will run on that device and make sure that everything is set up properly. Okay, TestNav 8 early warning system. So there's a couple of things that TestNav 8 has built into it automatically. And the first one is that obviously you want your students' responses to be stored as they're making them. So as they're going through the test and they're answering A, B, C, or D, or they're writing in to their fill in the blank fields, you want to go ahead and make sure that those responses are being saved. So the early warning system is doing that. It is saving those responses in real time in the background on the device that the student is actually testing on. So there's a little folder in the background that it's created that nobody sees or knows about, and it's saving those answers. And then every 2 to 3 responses are getting packaged up and sent to our servers. It's kind of a redundant backup. So you've got a backup locally, it's saving locally, and then it's sending little bundles off to our servers. And once we get them and confirm that they're valid and they're good and the data is okay, we tell TestNav, yep, we got it. It erases that information and then starts with the next bundle. So you've got kind of 2 ways that those answers are being saved, one at a time in real time, and then additionally in these little bundles off to our servers. That way, if the student for any reason is out of the test, there's a technical issue, there's an emergency, there's a fire drill, something happens, and the student has to be out of the test, when they come back into the test, that technology issue is resolved, the emergency is resolved, kids are back in the classroom, they're back at the computers or the devices, they can go right back into that test where they left off. Additionally, if there are any issues, the early warning system will pop up any error messages and say, hey, there's been an issue in the background. Something has happened and I need to stop the student from testing. If the student is pulling information from the Proctor Cache computer to start testing and the entire test has not been fully delivered, but somehow the Proctor Cache computer gets turned off. Somebody in the library thinks nobody's using the computer and they turn it off, and all these kids are trying to get, their test content delivered from it. Well, the early warning system will then present an error message on their screen at that point and say, hey, I can't let the student continue testing because the entire test can't be delivered and I don't want the student to take a partial test. So the early warning system is kind of twofold. One, it's saving all of that student data. So in case there's an issue, that data is saved and safe. And then also, if there is an issue, it's throwing up that error message to let you know there's been an issue so that you can resolve it and the test is still going to go forward and be successful. So the early warning system is a really great feature of TestNav. So those saved response files, as I mentioned, are constantly being written in the background in real time locally on the student's device, whether it's a Chromebook, a laptop, desktop, whatever, it's getting saved locally. And it's also getting saved in a more delayed fashion to our servers. So let's go ahead and put all of this together for computer-based testing, because I know it's a lot of information. So your technology coordinator, they want to make sure that the network is ready for online testing by whitelisting all those URLs we gave you, right? All of the communication that we're going to have going into your system and all the communication you're going to have coming out of your system to our servers, we want to make sure those communication streams aren't blocked. Otherwise, you're going to find errors throughout the process and you're going to have problems with testing. So All of those URLs need to be whitelisted across those spam content filters, anything that might block content or manage content in and out of your facility. You want to set up Proctor caching. You want to make sure that you install that Proctor cache software so that you can download that test content locally encrypted, so that that's how the students can get their test content. It's from your local area network and not from across the internet from our servers. You want to make sure that you have enough devices, that you've planned your testing, that you've planned your testing rooms, you have enough keyboards, mice, headphones, that the power strips aren't on the floor where students can kick their feet up and down and shut off the power strip to the whole line of computers in the computer lab. I don't give that example lightly. It's happened many times, and actually while I've been in a room with people helping support their live testing. So you want to make sure that you think about your testing rooms, how the students are going to be tested. If you're wireless testing, which is awesome, wireless testing is fully supported, you just want to make sure you use some best practices with wireless testing. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So some best practices with wireless testing is obviously the more wireless access points, the better. You want to have as few computers accessing that wireless access point as possible to maximize its ability. Distance closer is better than farther where wireless is concerned. Concrete walls in school buildings can sometimes be a pretty a good obstruction to access to a wireless router or access point. So you want to make sure you limit the obstructions between the computers and that wireless access point. And go ahead and test your performance before scaling. If you're just setting up or adding wireless access points, go ahead and do some tests and make sure that everything is working properly and those access points can support the number of testers at one time that you need it to support before you go scaling that out across your whole facility. So these are just some standard best practices with wireless testing, but it is fully supported. So as I mentioned, there are additional resources there at the bottom of that technology page on our landing page. So actaspire.pearson.com, that's your favorite URL of all time. Every other URL that I've referenced here today can be had from this centralized location. Go to that technology setup tab, and at the bottom of it are these additional technology resources. And then I said, this is a lot of information, so where do you start? Go straight here and get that technology coordinator checklist and that technical readiness manual. That's where you start, and it's going to walk you through this whole process and lead you down the path that I just talked you through. So are there any questions about this before we move on to the infrastructure trial information? So all of this setup is given to you in preparation for your infrastructure trial. But the good news is that when you do all of this setup and preparation, you are then also ready for actual testing. So you don't have to do this twice. You get to do it once for your infrastructure trial, and then you just have to kind of check it before testing and make sure nothing has changed. So are there any questions? Please feel free to use the Q&A. Pop open that Q&A box and just go ahead and type your question in there, and we'll be sure to answer it. Okay, I don't see anything there. We're going to just move on. At any time, if you think of a question, feel free to pop it in there. We've got just a few of you here today. We've got about 10 people, 9 or 10 people on, so we can take the questions. Feel free to ask them at any time, even if it's a topic past from 20 or 30 minutes ago. That's totally okay. I have no problem with that. All right, so let's talk about the infrastructure trial. So, well, I just went over the Q&A for you. We don't have to do that twice. So the infrastructure trial. So the best way to describe this is really this is a dress rehearsal, right? So if you've got live testing coming up and you haven't done a whole lot of online testing before, you want to go ahead and make sure everything's going to work great. This is the same thing as putting on a play, right? Before you have opening night and before the live act in front of an audience, you want to make sure everybody's costumes fit and the props in the background are good. And if anything's on automation and lights are supposed to come on and music is supposed to start or sound bites are supposed to pipe in, that all of that is timed correctly and it's all going to work well. This is the same thing with an infrastructure trial. You want to make sure all of the setup is good, everything's going to connect, all of the pieces and parts are in place, and that all of your staff are fully trained. They understand what their role is and what their part in the process is. So the infrastructure trial helps you do that whole dress rehearsal. It's basically saying, hey, we're going to practice online testing on Monday so that, next month or in the spring, we'll be ready to go because we've already done a practice and we know how this is going to work. So it's going to allow you to make sure that everyone's trained. It's going to allow you to check your bandwidth. You can do load testing if you want. It's going to make sure that all of your firewalls, content filters, spam filters, any of that traffic is going to go through without being blocked. And it's also going to basically finalize your communication plan, right? Everybody's going to know who talks to who about what, who starts it, who tells everyone, okay, we're going. Hey, I have an issue. Who are you supposed to call? Do you call your district coordinator? Do you call your tech coordinator? When do you call ACT Aspire? All of that's going to kind of get flushed out in your infrastructure trial. So we really do encourage participation with that. It's an incredibly good way for you to find out if everything's going to run super smooth or not. It uses simulated student data, so there is no live student data used in the infrastructure trial. And it uses the exemplar test, so these aren't real actual secure tests. So that's super good. And it also is in a separate tenant, so it's in what's called the infrastructure trial tenant. It's not even in your Hawaii tenant in the portal. It's in a whole separate box entirely. So all of the data around it is kind of in a separate area, and it doesn't retain any information around the test. So when you launch these exemplars as an actual test, there's no data being recorded and there's no reporting. I do have a question real quick. I'm going to stop right now. We do have a question on this presentation. Is it going to be available for later to listen again? Yes, it is. It's currently being recorded, and it will be posted to the Hawai'i Avocet. That's your online library under training under the name of this infrastructure trial webinar. So yes, this will be posted and is available for you. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about that infrastructure trial guide. So in our training management system, we do have all of this information. You'll see that on the screen there is a technology readiness overview. This is a recorded webinar of the information I just got done giving you. There is also recorded information on the infrastructure trial that I'm about to talk to you about, as well as the infrastructure trial guide, which is linked here to that webinar. So this is kind of like YouTube videos, right? I just recently got done learning how to bake bread. I was not good at it. Yeast bread is hard. But the way I learned how to do it was I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos, and I was like, oh, okay, I got some tips and tricks. Well, that's what this is about. Our training management system has all of this information available to you in these little recorded webinars, and they're small bites. You can see they're only 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, and you can get directly that information. And it doesn't cover just this pre-test information. There's assessment administration. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here, so you definitely want to be able to go here. And it's located right at our TMS site. So I'll launch that real quick so you guys can go look at it. You can get to it, of course, from our landing page. But if you go in and just put your email address, if you haven't signed in before, it will ask for a little bit more information. If you have signed in before, it will just take you directly to the TMS, and you can come right here. You can download that infrastructure trial guide, and you can launch the webinar. Basically the same information I'm going over today. If any of the previous information that I just talked about on the computer testing readiness is information you want to repeat, you can see this webinar again. But this exact Hawaii specific webinar with a combination of both will be posted to your Hawai'i Avocet. All of this can be found here on actaspire.pearson.com. If you come here to training and manuals and scroll to the very bottom, let me lift this up a little bit. Scroll to the very bottom is Avocet training and management system, and you can link to your Hawaii version of Avocet. That's your digital library, and you can visit the TMS by hitting that link right there. All right, let's go ahead and get back to our presentation. If you come here to the technology setup page, once again, this is where you're going to find all those resources. So as you're getting ready for your infrastructure trial, same steps as getting ready for real testing from a technology standpoint. You have to do all of the same things. It's a dress rehearsal. You have to wear the actual outfits. You have to have the real props in the background. So the same thing here. So you want to make sure your technology coordinators know to come here and have bookmarked the actaspire.pearson.com site and come to this technology setup page where all of that information is located. All right, to switch tenants. So when you're in the portal, and you're getting ready to set up for your infrastructure trial, you're the testing coordinator or the administrator at your school or your district, you are going to be in the Hawaii tenant. But you want to do the infrastructure trial in the infrastructure trial tenant. So you're going to come here to your profile details. So when you log into the portal, in the upper right-hand corner will be the little man icon, the little head icon, and you'll want to go ahead and select that and edit your profile. And then you can come here to your tenant and you can hit that switch tenant option. If you don't have that switch tenant option, that means you haven't been invited to the tenant and you need to be, then you need to contact your administrator or your testing coordinator and they can invite you to that tenant, and then you will have that option. And you'll be able to toggle back and forth between your testing tenant and your infrastructure trial tenant. So basically, it's like you've got a practice area, a sandbox, and then you've got your live area, and they're very separate. The actual school names that you're used to will not appear in the infrastructure trial tenant. Like I said, that's kind of a sandbox. It's a testing and training area. So you're going to have some more generic school names there, and everyone who has access to the infrastructure trial tenant is going to be able to see all of the test sessions that are getting set up from everyone else. So you want to make sure that you're only using your test sessions that you've created to do your testing with. So let's talk about that a little bit more here in a few minutes. So your district testing coordinator needs to invite users to the infrastructure trial tenants, just like they invite users to the Hawai'i tenant. So users need to be invited. So for you district testing coordinators and for you administrators who do that function, make sure that you invite your users and your technology coordinators to both the Hawai'i tenant and the infrastructure trial tenant. Not everybody needs to be invited, only those people who need to have access to the portal or need to engage with the portal. So for those room supervisors who may be using the portal to manage their test sessions, they're going to need access to the tenant. The technology coordinators who need to put that Proctor cache information, they're going to need access to the tenant. But remember, the Proctor cache information for the infrastructure trials is done at the test session creation stage. So that's actually probably going to be done by those administrators who create those test sessions. So your technology coordinator may not need access to the actual infrastructure trial tenant. So you're going to want to think through that process. Use that infrastructure trial guide as a way to figure all of that out. So I can't stress enough, please invite the users. Do not assume that they're automatically part of the infrastructure trial tenant. If you've invited them to the Hawai'i tenant, you need to then also invite them to the infrastructure trial tenant. How to invite people to a tenant? That's in the portal users guide. So instructions on how to do that are available as well. So let's talk about what works for both live testing and the infrastructure trial, and what is specific to only the infrastructure trial and has to be done again for live testing. And basically it all revolves around the portal. Anything that's done in the portal is going to be done twice, right? So if you set up a test session in the portal for the infrastructure trial testing, you have to still switch over to the Hawai'i tenant to set up your actual test sessions for real testing at a later date. If you go into the portal when you're creating those test sessions for the infrastructure trial tenant and you put in the IP address for your Proctor cache with those test sessions, you still have to toggle over to the Hawai'i tenant to set up Proctor caching in that tenant. So any Proctor cache setup that's gone on in the infrastructure trial tenant is not done in the Hawai'i tenant. Now your Proctor caching is set up, that's installed outside of the portal. That's on a computer in your library or your computer lab. But going into the portal to let us know or to let TestNav know that here's the IP address for that location, that will have to be done in both tenants. And remember, in the infrastructure trial, there is no live student data, so you don't have to upload a student data file like a student data file has to be uploaded for the Hawai'i tenant. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand, if it's done outside of the portal, then you only have to do it the one time, and it will apply to both activities. If it's done inside the portal, you will have to do it in both tenants, because the infrastructure trial tenant is a very separate area from your actual live tenant. Okay, so the test sessions. As I mentioned, the test sessions in the infrastructure trial tenant can be seen by everyone who has access to the infrastructure trial tenant. It's a shared workspace. So you want to make sure that you are naming those test sessions something that makes sense to you so you can find them easily and you can work with them. You also don't need as many test sessions to test with. Because the simulated student data works a little differently in the infrastructure trial tenant than actual student data does in the live tenant, you don't have to set up as many test sessions. You can set up only one or two. You can add as many students, simulated students into those test sessions in the infrastructure trial, and all of those authorization tickets in there can be used over and over again. That is not the same process with live actual testing. But you do want to make sure that those test sessions in the infrastructure trial tenant are saved in a way that you can find them quickly. So you'll notice here this one is named after the subject, the school name, and then also what devices. When you come in to the infrastructure trial tenant to find those test sessions, if you just come to the summative test menu and come to find my test, you'll see there's a search bar, and if you have a naming methodology for your test sessions, you can then just type it in there and all of your test sessions will pop up and you'll be able to see them right away, and you won't get muddled down by everyone else's test session. So we do encourage you to come up with a good naming convention. I did want to let you guys know that infrastructure trial invites are going to be going out tomorrow. So after this webinar this afternoon, you guys will start getting your invites tomorrow to the infrastructure trial tenant. So everyone on this webinar will definitely be receiving that invite tomorrow, so please look for that. And if you don't get that invite, please go ahead and give us a call. All right, so as I mentioned before, proctor caching, setting up the tenant to know that your proctor caching is a little different when you're doing an infrastructure trial than when you're doing actual testing. So when you're doing actual testing, you're going to go under organizations to proctor cache settings. You're going to put in that IP address and that port number, and that's going to apply to every single test session that's created from that moment on in your Hawai'i tenant in your school organization. Since the infrastructure trial tenant is a shared workspace, you don't want to do that. If you did that, then everybody who's in that shared workspace creating a test session is going to be linking to your proctor cache location. You don't want that. So what you do is you do that at the test session level. Basically, when you're creating a test session, at the very bottom is your proctor cache setting, and that's where you're going to put your IP address and your port number, and that's going to link your test session to your IP address of your proctor cache computer. So that's how you're going to do it for your infrastructure trial. So it's a little different. Just want to make sure everybody knows that. So once again, we talked about it earlier. If you go to organizations proctor cache setting, that's for live testing. You don't want to do that for infrastructure trial test. For your trial or dress rehearsal, you just want to do it at the test session level. So right here under create test sessions is where you're going to put that information, not here under proctor cache settings. You can still go to organizations and manage test sessions. You're going to see all of the test sessions. You can search for just yours, and you can look at that proctor cache column and make sure that that IP address is correct. So you can confirm that that is correct, and you can edit your test session if you need to. But once again, for the infrastructure trial, do not go to organizations, proctor cache settings, or pre-cache tests. All right, you can test all aspects of your assessment with your infrastructure trial. So you want to test your student workstations. You want to make sure the installable test nav is installed. We recommend installable test nav, but if for whatever reason, for whatever exception to the rule, you need to use a browser-based test nav, remember that you need to use Firefox ESR 45, the 32-bit version. You, through your infrastructure trial, you can do some load testing. You want to make sure computer stays connected. You want to make sure no error messages pop up. That's why these are exemplar tests. You can go through every question in the test to make sure that as you go through questions, scrolling works properly on every question. Questions that have some extra information that requires a little bit of scrolling on the testing device, you want to make sure that that's going to work properly. You can look at your proctor cache diagnostics, and you can see all the devices hitting it and pulling that test content, so you can make sure it's working properly. You want to make sure all your keyboards, headphones, batteries, internet cables, everything's connected right. So all of that stuff can be tested. You want to have a checklist so that you can make sure, yep, everything's working, and you can jot down if there are any issues. You know, the library had 2 keyboards that weren't working, and we were 3 headphones short. So you can write that on checklist. You can go get that fixed, and then you can run your infrastructure trial test again. There's no limit to how many times you can do this until you get everything right and you feel confident that everything is set up, everybody's trained, and you're good to go. So your student data, as I mentioned, is not actual student data. There's simulated student data within the infrastructure trial tenant. As you can see here, their last name, first name. So there's tons and tons of student data in there. You can go ahead and use this student information to add to your test sessions that you're creating in your infrastructure trial tenant. You can come here to find students. You'll see there's a whole bunch listed. But actually, when you create your test session, you can then just hit the add button within the test session once it's created, and it will list for you all of the students available to be added to your test sessions. So you can see that there. So here's an example. This test session has been created in the infrastructure trial tenant. There's a whole bunch of simulated students listed here. Now, because these are exemplar tests, you're going to actually be able to practice that the test data is downloaded from our servers to your Proctor cache, and you're going to be able to test that from a student computer. You can launch TestNav, put in an authorization code and password, and actually access that test data. But answering any of the questions in the test are not going to be recorded. So because that's not going to be recorded, TestNav is not going to change the status of the simulated student data in your test session. So when you actually use these authorization tickets to start the test for your infrastructure trial, for your dress rehearsal, this status is not going to change to active like it would in an actual test scenario. So don't be surprised by that, because the test data is not getting answered. So this answer total here in that second column, where it's 0 of 29 questions, it's going to stay that way because the answers are not getting stored in the background. So let's talk about the steps to conducting an infrastructure trial. So you want to get all of your technology set up, install Proctor caching, run system check on your laptops and desktops, install TestNav 8 on all of your devices. So you're going to come here to do all of that. Here's your Proctor cache. You want to go ahead and install it. You want to call up that diagnostic screen, that monitor Proctor caching. You're going to be able to see any of the test content. You're going to be able to see the students that are connected to it. You want to make sure that's running appropriately. You want to make sure that when you're in the portal, you're logged into the infrastructure trial tenant. Make sure it does not say Hawaii up in the corner. You'll know immediately too, because if you try to create a test session and add students, and the students don't show last name, first name, then you know that something's not quite right. So look up in that upper right-hand corner and make sure you are in the infrastructure trial tenant. Remember, you can switch tenants by choosing the little person icon in the upper right-hand corner there and editing your profile and switching from the Hawaii tenant to the infrastructure trial tenant. You want to go ahead and create a test session or two. You really only need to create one, but you can create two if you want to. You want to go ahead and put all of your test session information in there just like you would for live testing. So this is good practice for you in creating your test sessions. You want to name your test session. You want to set up a schedule for your testing, any additional details around your testing. And then, of course, if you are using Proctor caching, you want to put that Proctor cache information right here at that test session. Then once you've created that test session, you want to go ahead and add students to it. You just hit that add button, and you will see a list of simulated students that you are allowed to add to your test session. Just go ahead and select as many as you want. If you want to do load testing and you want to involve your students in your infrastructure trial test, which is something I do suggest, it helps your students know what the process is going to be like too. You can get 30 students in your computer lab, have them all sit in front of a computer, have 30 of these simulated students added to the test session. Go ahead and check the box next to however many students you want to add and hit done. They're in the test session. You'll see over here on the right-hand side that the username and password is there. You actually are going to be able to print authorization tickets. You would start the test session the same way you would do in real live testing. So in your infrastructure trial tenant, you're running through the same process. You're going to make sure that you start the test session. You're going to get those authorization tickets. You can print those out. You can give them to the students, and you can say, hey, everybody, log in and start accessing the test. And that's going to show that, hey, all 30 kids can log in at once. We didn't have any errors. We didn't have any performance issues. Your technology coordinator can be at his desk looking at the Proctor cache diagnostics and watching all of that student activity as they hit the Proctor caching location and they start downloading all of that test content. All of that can be done through your infrastructure trial. So you're going full circle from end to end, from setup all the way to a student actually accessing the test. You don't have to have your students involved. That's fine. You can just have other administrators and your technology coordinators can manage this process as well. Once you launch TestNav on those students' devices, you're going to use those authorization tickets that we just got here with those username and passwords. You're going to log into TestNav. There's a test audio button here you'll see. You want to test the headsets. So part of the infrastructure trial test is to make sure all of the devices are going to work properly. So you can test that your headsets or your earbuds are going to work. So you can do an audio test. You want to make sure you do your audio test before you sign in, because if you need to increase or decrease the volume on your headsets, you want to do that before you sign in, not after you sign in. So here are the steps. Install Proctor Cache, make sure it's working, go into the portal, create your test sessions, add your Proctor Cache information to your test sessions, add simulated students to your test sessions, print out those authorization tickets, and then go ahead and go to those student devices, launch TestNav, and use those authorization tickets to access those infrastructure trial exemplar tests, basically from end to end. And keep track, have that checklist, make sure that you keep track of anything that happens or anything that you encounter that you want to go ahead and fix, because you can always go back and do it all over again. Those authorization tickets can be used all over again. Unlike in live testing, once that authorization ticket has been used and an actual test has been submitted in live testing, that authorization ticket doesn't get used again for any other reason. In the infrastructure trial tenant, because no test data is being recorded, those authorization tickets can be used again. So you can print out, if you put 50 simulated students in your test session, you can print out those 50 authorization tickets, and then you can go through this process over and over again on your student testing devices until you make sure everything is done correctly and you're not having any issues. All of your peripherals are working properly and everyone feels comfortable and confident with the process. All right, so use your tracking spreadsheet. Determine if there are any configurations, practices, processes that you need to work on. Repeat the process as many times as you need to, and repeat them on all the different devices. If you have some kids testing on laptops and other kids testing on Chromebooks, based on the fact that they're using a mobile cart or they're going to be in the computer lab, test everywhere. Allow your test administrators to log in and look at TestNav 8 and be familiar with it. The students are the only ones who engage with TestNav 8, but your administrators, your room supervisors, your teachers should also engage with TestNav 8 so they understand the application and the process as much as what the students are going to experience. There's a link right down here that I've added so you can go straight to our exemplars. They're here on our home page under exemplar items, and you can come right down here for all of the subjects, different grades, and you just come here to the student sandbox, you launch that, and you would type in this username and this password to get this exemplar test. And so you can go over here to math, and you can do the same. So you would launch the sandbox and you would type in this username and this password to the TestNav 8, and you would get this exemplar test. And then you can go through, see the types of questions that the students will be experiencing for that subject and that grade, see what the navigation is like, so that you can make sure that you can help your students get comfortable with the process as well. So I do encourage that other administrators, room supervisors also experience TestNav 8, and don't leave that just for the students, because then when they raise their hand in the middle of a test because they have a question or a problem, that person is not necessarily as familiar with the application as the students are. So you want to make sure that everyone gets that experience. All of your resources are in your digital library. The Hawaii version of Avocet is at the avocet.pearson.com, Hawaii ACT Aspire home. You can also get there from, I'll go ahead and show you that. You can also get there from our landing page, as I showed you before. You can come right here to our landing page. If you're here under training and manuals, if you come to the very bottom, you will see that there is a link for the Hawaii Avocet right there, and it will take you right to your version of your digital library. Need information on Chromebooks? Hit the letter C, Chromebooks. Brilliant. Need some technology information? Hit the letter T, technology. Brilliant. Technology coordinator. Awesome. Hey, test coordinator. Even better. There's a checklist. So all of this stuff is alphabetical. If you're not familiar with Avocet, please go ahead and hit it. It's great. All of your information links are right here. You can download this information. It's only going to give you a preview of maybe 1 or 2 pages of a document, but you can then download that PDF and or print it out. And as I mentioned, for anyone participating in the infrastructure trial, please make sure that they see the infrastructure trial overview, launch that, it's only 30 minutes, and that they get the infrastructure trial guide. If you are a coordinator, administrator who is inviting other users to the infrastructure trial tenant, it is your responsibility to make sure everyone's trained on the infrastructure trial tenant because it is slightly different. It is a shared workspace from the live site. And so there are some differences there, and you want to make sure that they're aware of those differences, right? The 2 main areas where it's different is Proctor Cache setup in the portal. You set it up at the test session level for the infrastructure trial, and you set it at a global level for actual live testing. And then again, with the simulated student data and the fact that the student statuses in the test session will not change. So the test session itself is a little different. You want to make sure that people realize they're going to see test sessions for other areas that aren't theirs. Just ignore those and only focus on your test sessions. And when you're in your test session and you start it, you're not going to see those status changes that the students would go through in the real live testing. All right, so that covers about everything. Are there any questions? I see that you've been asking some questions out there, and there's some questions getting answered. So this is a recorded session. It will be posted to the Hawai'i Avocet to your digital library under training. So you will have access to this, as well as we are having another session in a couple of days this week, in 2 days at the same time on Thursday. Additionally, in the training management system, all of this information is already pre-recorded, so you can get that information right away. If anyone cannot make it or doesn't want to get a whole hour and a half's worth of recording, you're welcome to get it in smaller, more digestible chunks by going to the training management system and watching the infrastructure trial webinar, which is only 30 minutes, and the technology information, which is only 40 minutes. You can do it in smaller, digestible chunks. Any other questions? If you do need to give us a call, please do so. Our number is 888-802-7502. For Hawaii, please press 4. And we are available Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then, of course, ACT Aspire _implementation at actaspire.org is our email address. Please feel free to email us. People are checking those emails every single day, so we do respond back very quickly in a very timely manner. So if you don't have time to sit on the phone trying to reach us, please feel free to email us. We will get back to you. It's a great way to get some customer support. But the better way is to ask questions right now. So please feel free to use that Q&A box and ask any questions that you may have. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. I know this was riveting, edgy stuff. It's like a good murder mystery, isn't it? It keeps you on the edge of your seat. But try to realize it's a lot of information, but it really is pretty simple, right? You want the test content locally to set up Proctor caching. You want to make sure all your devices are in good working order, so you system check. You do have to go into the portal and make sure that there are test sessions so that you can get those authorization tickets. And that's whether you're doing an infrastructure trial or a live testing. And then you do want to go ahead and run your infrastructure trial test or your dress rehearsal to make sure everything's going to run smoothly when testing comes up. I will tell you that for those people who do not do infrastructure trial tests, you can run into little glitches that we often find when tech supporting during testing. We could have resolved had we found that during an infrastructure trial test. So I know you have a lot on your plates in the fall. I know with the holidays coming up, and obviously in the early winter, there's a million things to do in getting ready for the end of the school year and spring testing. But if you can squeeze in an infrastructure trial, it's only to your benefit, and it's only going to help you guys out. It can't hurt. Let me put it that way. Nothing bad can come from doing an infrastructure trial test, but you could find you have problems if you don't do an infrastructure trial test. So really, nothing bad can come from it. So I do suggest it. The infrastructure trial will end on December 30th. So I want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. So you want to do your infrastructure trial test now and get that done before the end of the school year so you can run through all those processes, and you don't have to worry about it in the spring. All you do have to do is some quick checks before testing and you're good to go. So the infrastructure trial will end on December 30th. Any other questions? We do have a couple of questions about some in-person training that's going to be in Hawaii soon. That will be happening shortly. It's mostly going to be around actual live testing, so it's not going to cover your infrastructure trial as much. A lot of some information around how to set up test sessions and how to use the portal will be the same, but it's really going to be more focused on getting ready for that spring testing, understanding how to use the portal, and some other information around spring testing. But you want to go ahead and make sure that this information on the infrastructure trial is covered either by people attending this webinar, going ahead and getting this recorded webinar off the site once it's posted to the Hawaii Avocet Digital Library, or using our training management system, and going to the pre-recorded webinars for technology setup and for infrastructure trials. Any other questions? Like I said, I know it's a lot of information. We have checklists out there that help you walk you through it. So there's a technology checklist and there's a test coordinator checklist in Avocet. So if you go to technology, the letter T, you'll see test coordinator and technology coordinator checklists there. That will help get you started. You do not have to obviously retain all of this information. It's impossible to do so, but all of it's there in that checklist and it will guide you through the process. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank everybody for joining today. I hope you're having a good afternoon. I hope you have a great week. If you do think of anything after we hang up today, please feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email and we will answer your questions as quickly as possible. So thank you so much for joining today. Once again, my name is Laura Jennings with ACT Aspire, and have a great afternoon.